Call Me Francis Tucket by Gary Paulsen. This is chapter 2. The mayor took over. Francis checked the cap on his rifle to ensure that it would fire and started the little mare down the front of the bluff to the plain below. It was quite vertical, but very near it, and the little pony squatted back on her haunches to keep from falling forward. She was nearly running when she hit the bottom. Francis started to hold her back, but she picked up the pace to a canter, then a full lope, and aimed right at the center of the massive herd. Things started to happen very fast, and almost none of them were under Francis's control. The mare flattened her ears and lined out at a dead run. The distance to the herd was diminishing rapidly, almost instantly. 1 second they were stumbling down the face of the bluff, and Francis was checking his rifle, and the next they were at the side of the buffalo herd. The mare stumbled, caught her footing, and dived into the herd. Francis had one fleeting image of a bull that seemed to blot out the world, and then was immersed in a sea of buffalo, so close they were pressing on the mare's side, rubbing against his leg, bellowing and snorting, raising clouds of dust. The mare, an Indian pony, had hunted buffalo before. The method used by Indians was to get in close so an arrow or lance could be used, and she remembered her training well. She took Francis in so close she nearly knocked a large cow over, slamming Francis against her side. Francis reacted without thinking. He was too close to aim, so he just pressed the muzzle against the shoulder of the cow where he guessed her heart would be, eared the hammer back with his thumb, and fired. The effect was immediate and startling. The cow went down, caving in and cartwheeling, dead almost before she hit the ground, and the rest of the world blew up. The herd had been made nervous, at least those near Francis, by the horse running into their midst. But there were wild horses everywhere. The buffalo were used to seeing them all the time, and while the mare running into the herd startled them, they did not really see Francis, only the horse, and would quickly have settled down. The gunshot ended any chance of peace. They had never heard gunfire before, but they had heard thunder, which meant lightning, and thunder and lightning terrified them. They panicked instantly, and within a moment of the panic, the entire herd, 40 to 50,000 buffalo, had Francis been able to count them, broke into a thundering stampede. By this time, Francis and the mare were near the middle of the herd. Francis had half a second to grab the mare's mane, wrap his fingers in the hair, and hang on before the herd took her. It was like being caught in a living river. The buffalo had been aimed south while they grazed, and that was the direction they ran. It was impossible to see. Dust rose in an almost solid mass, so thick at times Francis couldn't see the mare's ears, and within moments even the sky was gone. Without seeing the sun, Francis couldn't tell the direction, but it didn't matter. They were caught in the herd, and he let the mare run. She stumbled several times at first until she caught the stride, but the close press of the buffalo seemed to almost hold her up. They ran forever, or so it seemed. In the thick muck of dirty air, the deafening bellowing of the stampeding buffalo, and the constant push of the animals, Francis forgot time, place, anything and everything, trying to stay on the mare and stay alive. An hour passed, he was sure of it, and the buffalo kept running. They slowed or started to, then something would restart them and they'd be off again. The mare settled into the run, covered with sweat, her shoulders pounding. Once the herd seemed to be wheeling in a huge circle, but he still couldn't see the sun, still couldn't tell what direction they were moving. When they finally stopped blowing snot and wheezing, the mare staggered with fatigue. Francis didn't have the slightest idea where they were, how far they had come, or in which direction. They had turned once. He had felt the herd move, swinging around to the left, or was it right? He sat on the mare, catching his breath, while she whooshed beneath him, blowing to recover from the run. Except for the dust, which was rapidly settling, it might not have happened. Buffalo grazed peacefully around him while he looked this way and that, trying to locate himself. His left hand was still clutched in the mare's mane, and he released it, the knuckles aching. He had carried the rifle in his right hand, and he remembered now that it was empty from when he had shot the cow. He blew dust from the nipple on the action and reloaded, sitting on the horse. Powder, patch, and ball, then ramrod, all done carefully, slowly, so as not to bother the buffalo close around him, though they seemed to have forgotten he was there. With the ball seated firmly on the powder, he took a cap from his possible sack, pinched it to make it fit tight, and put it on the nipple. Eased the hammer slowly to the safety notch. There, he said aloud, then winced when a cow standing nearby started started at the sudden sound and turned her massive head toward the mare. He had to remember to keep quiet while he worked his way out of the herd. The problem was which way to go. He guessed they had been running at a good 15 miles an hour for over an hour. He thought they had come south, but the dust had covered the sun, and now there was low, thick clouds over it, and Francis had no way of knowing direction. The dust settled as he thought on what to do, and with that, he saw that he was near the edge of the herd. Scattered groups of buffaloes stood between him and clear prairie. He silently nudged the mare into the movement. She staggered a bit, but kept walking and moved through the buffalo to the clear area. The mare was still breathing heavily, and he knew whatever he wanted to do, he would have to give her a rest first, at least 4 or 5 hours. Better to let her rest all night. He pulled her up when he was 30 yards past the edge of the herd and dismounted. He was almost viciously hungry, had not eaten since the previous evening, and then had only a tin cup of thin soup and some pan bread the women with the train had made up. There were buffalo nearby, and he hadn't had red meat in over a week, so he picked a young bull 40 yards off and dropped him with a shot through the neck. The herd immediately stampeded again, as Francis had figured, but he was well clear of them, and they ran a direction away from him. The mare jumped with the shot, but he held tight to her catch rein, and there was no problem. This time he reloaded at once, recapping the nipple before approaching the downed bull, carefully ready to give it another shot if it came at him. Francis poked the bull with the muzzle of the rifle, but it had been a clean shot, breaking the bull's neck, and it was dead. Still, some instinct, some wariness made him stand back from the bull, sweep his eyes around, noting every small bush or depression anywhere anybody could hide. He smelled the air, listened, but there were no strange odors, just the smell of the buffalo, and no sounds but the horn rattle and the coughing bellow of the herd, now half a mile away where they had stopped from the run after his shot to kill the bull. He used the catch rope to make a twist hobble for the mare, took the saddle off, and let her go to graze. She had been hobbled before and moved her front feet in small steps while she fed. Francis would have liked to let her roll, but the hobbles prevented that, and he didn't dare let her go loose. She'd take off, and he'd be afoot. With the mare settled in for rest and grass, he turned to the dead buffalo. It had fallen straight down on its chest, its chin furrowed into the dirt. He had never skinned a buffalo, and when he tried to turn it over to get to the underside, he found it was impossible to move. Oh, I bet. The bull was too heavy to even roll over. For a full minute, he studied the carcass and finally decided he wouldn't be able to skin and clean it as he had done with deer and antelope when he was with Jason Grimes. As much as it bothered him to waste any part of the animal, he would just have to take meat from the dead bull the best he could. He had sharpened his knife the day before on the small stone he carried in his possibles bag, and he leaned the rifle carefully against the front shoulder of the bull, where he could reach it fast if he needed to. And he pulled the knife from the leather scabbard he had on a strap over his shoulder. He cut down the center of the back, surprised at how easily the skin opened to reveal the yellow-white back fat and rich meat. The meat was still warm, and the thick smell of blood came up into his nostrils and caught. It made his hunger worse, and he cut a chunk of meat from the back and ate it raw. Ugh. Chewing it only a few bites before swallowing it. Good, he mumbled to himself. So good. It took him less than half an hour to peel the hide down both sides and cut a large portion of the meat from the hump and the tenderloin and set it aside. Clouds of flies surrounded him. They were part of the buffalo herd anyway, laying eggs in the fresh manure that covered the prairie wherever the herd moved. They were drawn by death and the fresh smell of blood, and within a few minutes Francis couldn't see anything through them. They carpeted the meat he set aside, covered his hands, face, where were in his eyes. Fire! He knew that smoke would drive them away, and he found some dry grass and twigs, poured a tiny amount of powder from his horn in the middle of the pile, noted that the horn was less than half full, and struck a spark with his flint. The spark hit the powder, flashed it, and the heat started the grass and kindling. He quickly added some sticks, dry grass, and some large pieces he found nearby. When the fire was high, uncomfortable in the heat of the evening, he propped a 6 or 7 pound slab of meat up on sticks close to the flame to cook, and went to gather some more wood. He had decided to spend the night, and he wanted enough wood to last until morning. The dead wood was sparse, however, and by the time he had made a pile large enough to last It was nearly dark, and the smell of the cooked meat was driving him crazy. He had never been hungrier, and he sat by the fire on his rolled out bedroll, leaning against the saddle, and ate the entire piece of meat, taking small sips from his canteen between chunks. As soon as it was hard dark, coyotes came in to the dead bull, not 30 yards away, and ate. He could see their eyes shining in the light from the fire as they tore at the buffalo, but he knew they would not bother him, and he paid them no mind. With his stomach bulging and the warm fire on his face, sleep hit him like a wall. Something bothered him, and he couldn't quite pin it down. Something that he was doing wrong, but the feeling was strong enough to keep him awake. He pulled his rifle in closer, added wood to the fire, rolled his blanket over to make a cocoon, and within minutes was fast asleep. I wonder what he did that he shouldn't have done or forgot to do. Well, we'll find out when we get to the next chapter. Until then, bye.